This is the LuceOut Overlight, and it's one of my most favorite mice that I've ever used. It's a custom 3D printed G Pro wireless with a slightly modified shape, and it only weighs 38 grams. I would even go so far as to say this is almost the perfect mouse for me. But there's one major flaw in my copy, and I'll be covering that later in the video.
Freeze on you though.
Ooh.
That was nasty, dude.
Let's first talk about the good. Now, this is going to be subjective, but amongst the mice where my aim is the best, this is definitely in my top 3. Like, seriously, my tracking felt absolutely disgusting with this mouse. I've been using it for about 2 months now, and I've been trying it in quite a variety of games, and because the shape is so similar to the G Pro wireless, you already know it's a killer shape. The difference between the shapes is very minimal, but on the LuceOut, the slope of the front mouse buttons is a bit steeper. Personally, as someone with large hands, I think I prefer the stock shape of the G Pro wireless, but again, the change is so small that it didn't really bother me. And if you're not a fan of the shape, it is worth mentioning that LuceOut also makes several other variants that use completely different shapes. And I believe they're also in the process of adding even more options. In terms of build quality, I was actually impressed. Now don't get me wrong, this mouse looks very flimsy and flexible. It definitely is due to its 3D printed nature, but that said, it still feels relatively robust. And for the most part, it doesn't really flex under normal use when I'm just gaming with it. It'll only flex if you try to make it flex. Although there is one area of the mouse where you can make it flex occasionally, and that would be in the front of the mouse. I noticed in some tense situations when I'd click too hard, the mouse button would actually slide under the top ledge here. I'm not sure how it is on the other LuceOut shapes, but at least with the Overlight, that is something to watch out for. Now, the material and texture is a little hard to explain without actually having felt it in your hand for yourself, but it's sort of got a fibery feeling to it, if that makes sense. It isn't what I would describe as bad, but it's not going to be a premium feeling coating either. But personally, it didn't really bother me. In fact, I would say I was indifferent to it at first, but I actually grew to like it because what I noticed is it doesn't collect sweat and oils to the same degree that other coatings do. And I think that might be an unintended benefit of using this type of plastic. If you're wondering about the internals and how it is they're able to pump out so many shapes so quickly, that's because it's actually using parts from another mouse, the Delux M800 Pro, which is a pretty solid budget mouse that uses the Pixart 3370. So in theory, the performance of the LuceOut Overlight should be really good. However, this is sadly where things start to fall apart a little bit for me. And I want to add the disclaimer that the problem I'm about to discuss could technically happen on any mouse, and it's very likely that I just got unlucky with my specific copy. But for whatever the reason may be, I had times where the sensor would spin out on me. And I'm not just talking about the tilt slam test, but it would happen randomly. It was very rare and it only happened a few times throughout all my testing, but I was able to screen record it a few times. 99% of the time I had no problems with it and had an absolute blast owning noobs, but it would make me concerned if I plan on using this mouse for anything competitive. At least on the unit that I got. Now, it's very likely, again, that I just got a faulty sensor. That does happen, and I'm sure they would replace it, so I'm not going to hold that against them, but I still thought I should mention it as a reviewer. At first, I thought it might have been a liftoff distance issue, so I tried using a different mouse pad, and eventually even changed out the mouse gates to see if that would make the issue go away, which sadly it didn't. But while I'm on the subject of the mouse gates, the ones that come with it are pretty neat. It originally came with PTFE core pad dots, but like I said, for the sake of testing, I traded them out with some random skates I had lying around. The original ones that it came with give you a nice slow and controlled feeling, at least as far as PTFE is concerned. I think a lot of people would really like them. Now, the battery life is a little lackluster. It's not going to last for weeks on end like the other top wireless mice, and I had to charge it every single night in order to use it the next day. But this comes with the trade-off of it being under 40 grams, which is absolutely awesome. And frankly, this mouse now has me spoiled because even going to something like the PureTrek Valor, which is about 65 grams, now feels heavy to me. Which, to be honest, is kind of funny to think a 65-gram mouse would feel heavy. We've definitely come a long way in terms of pushing the limits of ultralight mice, and the LuceOut mice are a prime example of this. Using a mouse that still fits my large hands and maintains a good shape while being under 40 grams makes it very hard to not like this mouse. But the weight is not the only good feature of the mouse. The switches are KL 8.0, so the clicks are nice and tactile, and you can even adjust the pre-travel using these screws right here. I was satisfied with the way it was out of the box, so I didn't bother with it, but this is a really cool feature. The side buttons are also nice and crisp, although they do stick out a tad too much in my opinion. If you're curious about the software of this mouse, because it uses the Delux M800 Pro internals, it also uses their software. So you can adjust all the things you would expect, like liftoff distance, polling rate, debounce time, RGB, which, yes, this mouse does technically have RGB, although I would leave it off to save battery. And of course, you can adjust the DPI as well. Outside of the spin-out issue that I talked about earlier, there is one more small quirk, and that is that you have to have it plugged into either your motherboard or a powered USB 3.0 port. For some reason, this wireless receiver is very finicky when it comes to which USB ports it works in and which ones it doesn't, and it might take a little trial and error. I'd say despite the problems I had with this mouse, I would still slot it in my top 5. I've really enjoyed using it, and if you're an enthusiast that wants to try a lightweight version of your favorite mouse, LuceOut is definitely a company to keep an eye on. If they ever made a Zowie S1 shaped mouse, that would probably be my #1 mouse. And if you're curious why I love that shape so much, here's my review of the Zowie S1C on screen now.